Good morning and a warm welcome to everyone who's joined the webinar already. And as I see the panel, I see many more people joining in. So let's get started. We are here for the webinar Execution Excellence with Kanban, brought to you from Swift Kanban from Digitay. Let me go ahead and set the agenda. So we'll start with some introductions to the panelists today. And I will provide a quick introduction to Swift Kanban and Digitay, just a few minutes. And then we will have a presentation from the main presentation, Execution Excellence, a case study at ATK. And after that, we will have a panel discussion amongst the panelists, and we will also open it up to audience questions and answers. So some housekeeping for that. We will take the questions via the Q&A box that you should see on the right side of your screen. We will take them, if needed, group by topics that they are on, or otherwise we take them as they come in. The webinar is being recorded, and the slides and the recordings will be made available to all the people who attend the webinar in a follow-up email that we will send out to you. So with that, let me go ahead and introduce today's speakers. The main speakers are Gary Perkerwicz and Jim Gawtry, both of whom work at ATK in ATK IT. And we have Dragosh Dimitriou from CC Pace. And my name is Mahesh Singh. I'm from Digitay Swift Kanban. Just to give you a little bit of introduction to the panel, Jim and Gary work for ATK, which is a company that holds leadership positions in outdoor sports and aerospace and defense. Jim has worked at ATK for almost 30 years, and over that time he has been the manager or lead on a number of mission critical systems, everything from manufacturing to HR systems. And currently he leads a 4-person IT team that's responsible for supporting and maintaining an enterprise HR system. Gary has worked at ATK for over 25 years, and over that time he has been a manager or lead on a number of teams responsible for supporting or maintaining mission-critical enterprise systems. His latest gigs have included quality assurance and automated testing. I've known Gary now for the last more than 3 years, and over that time I've got to know him as a Kanban enthusiast and a really good friend. I'm very happy to introduce Dragosh, who's also become a good friend over the last year, number of months, and probably over the last more than a year. Dragosh's innovative work in managing software engineering processes 10 years ago paved the road for what is known today as software Kanban systems, a management method proven to identify and eliminate constraints and waste while improving throughput and team dynamics for knowledge work organizations. This story is described in Chapter 4 of David Anderson's book, Kanban, A Successful Evolutionary Change for Your Technology Business. Dragosh's experience includes building, leading, and coaching large distributed teams, both onshore and offshore. Over the past 20 years, he's performed in almost every role critical to software development and IT operations. He has held leadership and consulting and training roles for Siebel, Microsoft, and Lean Kanban Inc. in over 300 customer engagements worldwide. Currently, Dragosh manages the agile training and consulting practice for CC Pace Systems, a business and IT consulting firm headquartered in Fairfax, Virginia. Just a quick introduction to Digitay. Digitay is a pioneer and has been a pioneer in web-based collaboration products and solutions for geographically distributed teams. We are headquartered in Cupertino, California, and we have over 300,000 users in the Americas, Europe, and the Asia Pacific. We work closely with Kanban pioneer David Anderson himself, and a lot of our work that we've done in our Kanban product is based on the thought leadership that he's provided in this field over the last so many years. And of course, we work with a number of other thought leaders as well to get guidance in terms of Lean Kanban vision and our product roadmap. And our products, of course, cover Lean Kanban, Agile ALM, project portfolio management, and of course, Swift Kanban is our flagship Lean Kanban product. Just a quick look at what Swift Kanban looks like and how it's being used in a variety of different situations. So obviously, IT and software development are a big area where it is used, but it's also been used for a number of business functions, whether it is HR, marketing, sales, recruitment, procurement, and a number of other functions. And of course, a lot of people use it for personal Kanban and in as simple things as planning a party or for managing work at home and a variety of different purposes. So Kanban provides a real rich set of metrics and analytics for teams to improve their overall performance, throughput, and quality of work that's delivered to their customers. And here is just a quick smattering of the various customers that we have around the world that have used digitized products. So with that, I'm going to hand this over to Gary and Jim. Jim and Gary have worked with each other for over 25 years. And during that time, they have seen a lot of improvement initiatives come and go, including BPM, JIT, TQM, and others. None of these initiatives have made an impact to their work or culture. There is something different about this current initiative that they have, and that is why we are here to share a success story that other companies have been equally successful at adopting in the last couple of years, improving workflows and organizational culture using lean principles and Kanban systems. So with that, Gary, I'm going to hand this over to you. Let me just make you presenter. There you go.
All right. Okay, can you see my desktop here, Mahesh?
Yep, did it just come up?
Okay, and let's get into presentation mode here. Okay, everything look okay?
Yep, good to go.
Okay. Again, we'll start by saying we've not done what we've done here alone. We've had world-class help along the way. Dragos has helped us with training and coaching as well as others. And perhaps we'll talk a little bit more about that in subsequent sessions. We're planning at least a couple of sessions here. And in this first session, Jim and myself will be sharing more really of his story and his team's story. What we'll be talking about over these next couple of sessions is really why we started, what we achieved, how we are continuing to improve, and how others could do likewise. In this first session, though, we're going to focus more on why we've started and begin to talk a little bit about the kinds of things we've achieved. But before we do that, a little bit more context. So, Jim, maybe you can give us a few more details about your team.
Sure. We started work on this Kanban about 2.5 years ago, and the team that I support is made up of two functional groups, IT and HR. The HR group is made up of a director, 2 managers, and up to 12 individual contributors. The individual contributors kind of do the work of business analysts. They also do acceptance testing along with all their other work. Change orders throughout the company come through the HR group, and these change orders can vary from as small as correcting a spelling on a page to a bolt-on that could take 4 or 5 months. The IT team is made up of myself, a lead, and then 3 workers. And we've started using the Swift Kanban probably about a year ago or so. And when we first rolled this out, I think what we didn't realize is where we would be now. We're much farther than anybody in the group would ever have envisioned we'd be after 2.5 years.
So tell us a little bit more about this, Jim. Why is the initiative different? You know, like Mahesh was saying a little bit before, you know, we've worked on stuff before together in our careers, our 25 years and stuff like that, and we've seen various kinds of things come and go, BPM, JIT, different kinds of initials and so on and so forth, but it's different this time. And what's with this?
Well, it's simple to use. It's a very visual process. It's not intimidating. It's easy to, you know, for beginners to pick up. It doesn't take a lot of effort. The electronic board is very effective for us because we have a remote user. That is, we have a user that sits in Utah, we're in Minnesota, and with the physical board, she could see the blurs, but she couldn't read any of the descriptions.
Yeah, so we were in like a WebEx meeting at that time, and we had a webcam, and it was difficult for them to see anything.
Right. It's clear, concise, very visual, like I said, and we have daily stand-ups. We've seen it improve our quality. Work in processes has reduced, at least that's where there's a sense we have.
Mm-hmm.
Our backlog has gone down. Handoff between IT and HR takes much less time, and we're waiting less and working more. Our flow efficiency has gone up. We've done a better job of estimating, and the morale in the team, which has always been good, but it seems to be much better now.
So we'll talk a little bit about both, why we started with this initiative, and I'll start by talking from my own perspectives. So how did I get to meet Mahesh some 3 years ago? What explains that? Back in 2009, I was working as a QA lead, focused on process and improvement activities, and my boss at that time asked me to go attend some quality training, internal quality training within our company, and it was called PES, or the Performance Enterprise System. And it's our version, or ATK's version of the Toyota production system. So after that training, I came back kind of excited and started telling people about this cool stuff, with this Performance Enterprise System. And it seems to me, Jim, I remember your face when I was coming back telling you about this stuff, and sort of a little less than outright beside yourself enthusiasm and glee at the prospect of this. The kinds of questions I had coming back, or as I shared this, was, well, what is this stuff having to do with pull? How does that pertain to what we're doing in IT and knowledge work? And I started looking around to see if somebody had a good answer to that question, and ran across the work of Don Reinertsen, who it turns out was going to be speaking at the first Lean Software and Systems Conference in Atlanta in 2010. So I read Don's book, Principles of Product Development Flow, and went off to attend the conference, where I met David Anderson, who was just releasing his book, his blue book there, the Kanban, Successful Evolutionary Change for Your Technology Business. Anyway, this conference was like the best conference I'd ever attended, and Reinertsen's keynote was the highlight of the conference. And among the points he made there was a point about the importance of limiting work in progress, rapid feedback, and small batch sizes. And this emphasis on limiting work in progress, rapid feedback, and small batch sizes is exactly what's at the heart of what we're doing with our Kanban systems. So both Don and David point out that teams should be using an economic model to make decisions. And right now, our decisions are being based on a very simplistic economic model. Deliver more of what customers want for less time and money. We're following Anderson's approach, and the rest of the Kanban community. We're inspired by them and following their work, and we're using that to introduce and mature our Kanban systems. And as we mature them, we capture data to more and more inform our economic decisions. So a lot of stuff has happened since that conference back in 2009. A lot of things are rippling throughout our company. We started introducing this Kanban method to our IT teams and to some non-IT teams as well. And we would incorporate our experience from our field experience, basically from implementation of Kanban, into our ongoing PES training sessions. So Kanban has been spreading steadily throughout various parts of our organization. Right now we have almost 25 boards, electronic boards in Swift Kanban. There's well over 200 people in our organization with personal boards, and at least 5 teams with physical Kanban systems in Utah. And I know there are others in our company who are doing this sort of stuff, at various levels of maturity and stuff like that. I just haven't made it a priority to track what's going on all across the organization. But for this session, our focus is going to be on one of those teams, Jim's team here, the IT HR team. And we're looking at them because they are among the most advanced users of the newest capabilities in Swift. And so we have a story here of a team that basically, IT team that had a good, strong relationship with its HR customer. And with Kanban, the relationship has become even stronger and measurably more productive as they transition to an electronic board. So there are several situations that I found that can benefit from a lean Kanban system. We often see teams, or I often see teams that are too busy. They're working on a lot of tasks and projects at the same time. They get asked to begin new work despite having too much work underway already. And on the other hand, what's happened with Jim's team as we transition to an electronic board, started to observe WIP limits more and more closely, and within 6 months, his work in progress was reduced by as much as 60%. And limiting work in progress naturally results in focus. So the team has just less things that they have to pay attention to at the same time. Now, when something comes up that slows down flow and expedites a block or a WIP overage, it's immediately visible to Jim and the team. The team can see it, they can act on it. We see much better coordination and communication among the team members then. Before, when there was a high priority issue that had to be dealt with, a lot of work in progress would have to be put on hold or deprioritized. And then later on, when people came back to it to finish the work that was on hold, they'd oftentimes have to start all over again because they'd lose the context. Other times, tickets would stall out because they were waiting on a dependency. Now, the overall cycle time metric in Swift makes the wait time visible. And just being aware of the wait time seems to be positively influencing team behavior. And because of that, we're seeing wait time trend smaller. So helping teams limit work in progress, stay focused, and eliminate unnecessary task switching and/or waiting is at the heart of how we are delivering more of what our customers want in less time with our Kanban systems. So Jim, let me ask you again. That was kind of my story why we got started. What about you? Why did you start using Kanban in the first place, and what problem were you trying to solve?
Well, like many of the other initiatives, I tried to procrastinate and not use it, but I was mandated by my supervisor that we will start using it, so fine.
Well, and it was also just a great opportunity to work with me, so I mean, people are going to want to know that too, Jim, right?
So, you know, we first started it, it was like, yeah, I don't know what's going to do, but after we started getting into it, we started noticing shortly that, well, it was a really good way to show our backlog. It was very visible. Even though it's just another way of showing it, it was much easier for your mind to grasp, oh my gosh, we have a blockage here, we have a blockage there. But initially getting by that, it added value right away. We could see that. We could see it managing our flow, our cycle times based on how much WIP we have. We have a daily stand-up meeting, and it's just 5-10 minutes, but yet there's a lot of communication that took place. It shortened the feedback loops from hours and days to just minutes. Before Kanban, we would meet weekly. We still do meet weekly for an hour, but it was more just a recap. People didn't feel comfortable asking questions. And in the daily stand-up, it's an easy way of showing blocks. It shows expedites. Team members who have worked on, they know what impact they have on someone else. They can see, oh, if this doesn't happen, then I'm affecting somebody else. The face-to-face communication of stand-up is just a fast way to communicate. I'm terrible at written communication, and so with the stand-up communication, it prevents several emails going back and forth, trying to clarify things. And groups would break out into small little meetings. If a problem came up, usually we'd get a resolution within the group. The other big thing I did notice was with the HR manager and directors attending these meetings, they got to see what impact a block had on the system and took a much more active role to say, okay, what can we do to get this block unblocked? What can we do to keep this moving? Do I need to step in? Do I need to assign another user to help test? Do I need to go ask another supervisor, manager in the company to prioritize this? So that was really good. We're using the Swift Kanban and some of its metrics, and we think our quality has been improved. We're just getting to that point, and why is it improved? Some of it is just I believe people are more focused. Testers have more time because they're not being dumped on as much as we used to.
Mm-hmm.
So I think testing is much better. And I think the stand-up meeting, people feel much more open to just bring up questions, bring up concerns. You know, I know originally when a block ticket would come up, it was almost like, why are you picking on me? Now it's like, no, that's a good item. What can we do to get that unblocked? So just much better for everybody all around.
So maybe, and I've seen these benefits too as I think back about the dynamic that's unfolded in your group. Again, you had great relationship among all the players, but the level of engagement that management is showing as you're going through this, and then just even with the team that was fairly tight to begin with, it's definitely made a difference. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about some of the other benefits that you saw as you transitioned to the electronic board.
Sure. One of the things, when we had a physical board, trying to get the metrics, it was I would take a picture of the board every day, kind of say, here's where we were. I would try to capture the numbers, where things were, work in progress, waiting for testing, you know, write them down on a board, a notebook, enter them into a spreadsheet, then try to interpret how these numbers should be put into a cumulative flow diagram.
Right.
You know, wait time delay. Some of the things we couldn't really find was when items would go back from test to development. You know, how often did that happen? We tried to do some manual, but it just wasn't very accurate. So I think the Swift Kanban helped us collect those metrics very much so easier. It's also a great way for making commitments to each other. Right now, before we pull a ticket onto the board, we meet with our user. We say, okay, if I have this to you by X day, and I hand the baton to you, when will you be able to have it done testing?
Yeah.
So we're getting some commitments there. In the past, I think what we did was we would just say, okay, HR prioritized these, we're going to do this, you know, in the order of priority, and just basically throw them over the wall.
Mm-hmm.
And, gee, why aren't they being tested? Well, you look, and 8 of the top 10 priorities all went to one user.
Right.
And so they didn't have the capacity to do the testing. So now what we look at the board. Oh, wait a minute, there's already one user that's got 2 items on there. It's not going to do any good to keep pulling items that they have to work on.
Right.
So we go past priority, look at who's got availability. We have a part of our board we'll have the service under 3 weeks. We say, if you give us to it, when we start it, we'll have it in production in less than 3 weeks. That includes development, testing, and moving to production.
Yeah, so you got a class of service that's 3 weeks or less that you deliver on. Right.
And since we started, I think we've improved that the metrics show that we've improved that by 12%.
Yeah.
We've been able to keep that promise within under 3 weeks better.
Mm-hmm.
There's another feature on Swift Kanban called this playback, which is kind of what we tried to do on a physical board by taking a picture, but it didn't show the accurate movement completely.
Right.
So the playback is a really good feature. I like it because it shows how tickets move forward. Sometimes they move back, mm-hmm. and then you can go in and analyze why did that happen. Mm-hmm. One thing when we transitioned to the physical board, or excuse me, the electrical board, right. Electronic board,
yeah.
We asked our users, let's go through this backlog. Let's be realistic. We had a lot of items on there, and what we ended up finding out that some of those items have been on the backlog for 5-6 years. Yeah. And it's like, we haven't done anything with them for 5 years. Do we still need them? Right. In some cases, yeah, they still do. It would be nice to have, but in a lot of cases, it was, let's get rid of them. So that helped a lot. By doing all this, we started practicing the Kanban motto, which is stop starting and start finishing.
So talk a little bit more, Jim, about the kinds of problems that you're working on next. What problems are you trying to solve now?
We're really trying to become more predictable so that what we promise, we keep.
Yeah.
The electronic board, along with the data we collect from the physical board, gives us a good baseline to build a forecast model for working items by class of service and even by portfolios. One of the things we've just experienced is with this, we were able to kind of notice that several times during the year we have high demand for one specific task. This summer we put in a bundles true up on our HR system, which basically said about 95% of both IT and HR was focused on that one task.
Mm-hmm.
So, but by capturing this, we discovered that, you know what, we have these several times during the year. In the summer, we usually do true-ups. Right now, we're going through our open enrollment period, so most of our effort is focused on that. Because of HR, we support payroll. You have calendar year times where we're very busy. Our fiscal year is the 1st of April, so right during the couple weeks leading up to it, a couple weeks after it, we have a lot of organizational changes that we have to support. Then in May is our compensation mod rollout, so most of that time. So we're noticing that we have these pockets where, we can't really work on anything but what that task is.
Mm-hmm.
So that's always been helpful. So that gives us these case studies where, oh, okay, we know these time frames are coming up. Users, you know what, can we hold off doing these until after or prioritize them a little tighter? So if you have to have something, yeah, we'll work on it. But if it's a nice to have, let's hold it off until after those. So besides being more predictable, one of the big things we're still trying to achieve is quality.
Mm-hmm.
We know that we can improve on it, whether it's better requirements, whether it's better communicating with our users to understand what they truly want, it's coding better, it's maybe we missed requirements from our users or from us, but we just want to make so that we don't have the failure demand, so that we're going back reworking things.
Mm-hmm. And again, failure demand is either delivering to the user something that's incorrect, not what they wanted, or it doesn't meet their requirements in some way. Okay, cool. So we'll say a little bit more about and transition now to this. Okay, so that's why we did what we did. Let's talk a little bit more about what we actually ended up achieving. And the thing we'll introduce here is something that you mentioned earlier, this cumulative flow diagram. The cumulative flow diagram is basically a diagram of all the cards or tickets we've completed over time. It helps us to see how well we are dealing with the demand we're getting from our customers. And there's really, I'd say in general, 3 bands to pay attention to on the cumulative flow diagram. The first one is the backlog. It's what we have to do. The second one is the work in progress, and this is the one that's in the middle here. This is all the stuff that we're working on. And the final band is the throughput, what we have done. So that white area in the middle shows what happens when a team stops starting and starts finishing work. Work in progress shrinks, and you can see over time how that white area in the middle of the diagram there is becoming smaller and smaller. That's what focus increasing over time looks like. Focus increases and task switching decreases. And the cool thing about this is we can measure the improvement. So we have metrics now that we can use to quantify some of these benefits. So again, the topmost gray band in this picture is what we have to do, the backlog. So let me ask you, Jim, we see the backlog going from 44 to 33. I mean, why is that a good thing? I mean, maybe your users have just given up on you. They're stopping asking for stuff. I mean, why do you look at this and say this is good?
Well, some of it is, like I said before, the users went back and cleaned up the backlog.
Yeah.
Some of it is, hopefully, our quality is better, so we don't get that failure demand.
Right.
And some of it is, I think they realize that, you know what, this is so nitpicky that it's not really going to improve. I'm not even going to ask for it.
Okay.
So
now the next group of bands is what we're doing, the work in progress, or the WIP. And these, again, are all these skinny little bands between the backlog and the large orange band at the bottom, which is what we have done. And again, it's easy to see that the work in progress here is diminished quite significantly. Why is that a good thing from your perspective?
That really, in the past, I think we had a lot of this switching time, where we'd have so many items we were working on that you really couldn't concentrate on any given 1 or 2, 3 items.
Right.
And the user would say, okay, I want you to now take over this, work on this one. So you would, and now you went back to something. It would take you sometimes an hour, sometimes a day or longer to get back to where you were prior to getting pulled off of it. So if we can keep that work in process down, you don't have the switching time. You can be more concentrated and I think deliver a better product.
And then the final band is throughput. And this is showing a slowing going on in mid-June through July. And it's a little bit hard, again, to see on the cumulative flow diagram. You have to kind of look at the angle that's diminishing here. The throughput chart shows this particularly well, but we're going to leave that discussion of the throughput chart for the next session. The main point I want to make here is that by observing WIP signals, work in progress signals, we end up with a baseline stable system, and we can use our metrics to measure our next improvement. That's really key. So before we started observing WIP limits, and this goes back to the question that when I first came back and said, hey, this stuff about PES, Toyota Production Substance System, is really cool. It's all about pull. And you said, well, what does that have to do with me? This is really a visualization of what it has to do with you and with others who are trying to use a Kanban board for knowledge work. Before we started really observing WIP limits, we were pushing more and more work into our system. Whether we have the capacity to do it or not, just get started. And that's kind of like this push with the paper clips here. You get this stack of paper clips, this stack of work in progress going on. And it's hard to see the relationships among the paper clips in a pile. It's just a pile of paper clips. When we start to observe WIP limits, however, we start pulling tickets throughout the system, and we're able to begin to collect metrics. We can begin to see patterns in our data, and we can begin to better see how we can, in fact, improve. So it's easy, I think, to see how a pull system can be a much more stable system, and a more stable system makes our metrics more informative. And that's really the answer to the place and purpose of a pull system in knowledge work. So I think at that point, I'm gonna throw it over to Dragos. Dragos, anything from your perspective that you wanted to add before we go into the panel discussion and Q&A? And I'm not sure if you're speaking, Dragos, if I can hear you. Mahesh, are you there?
Yes, I'm there, and yeah, I hope that Dragos can speak
yes,
here.
hi. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes, we can.
Great. I was suggesting that we start taking some questions, and I think it's a natural way of continuing, and we'll take it from there. See what questions people have.
Okay.
All right, great. So I'd welcome all people on the webinar today to ask questions. And Gary, I'm going to start off with one of my own, both to you and Jim. One of the things that we constantly run into is concerns that teams have about how easily would they be able to limit WIP, limit work in progress. Management expects teams to do more with their time and more with the resources that they have. Customers expect more, and we see some of that ourselves. The number of feature requests that we might get for Swift Kanban, or any IT organization gets for building new enhancements to their applications, etc., always exceed the the amount of capacity that they might have. I noticed Jim say that you had HR managers attend your stand-up meetings, but what did you have to do to manage the expectations of management and customers. How did you get their buy-in so that you could actually limit WIP?
Well, part of it was, I think, them physically seeing on the board that when you pulled too much into it, you actually were slowing down the output. Yeah, you might get things done started, but by limiting it, you actually saw the flow of the ticket all the way across the board. And I think that's something that they had to visually see. You know, we talk about it. I know Dragos has talked many about it in a lot of his seminars. It's a visual thing that they see, and you say, trust me. You know, it's hard, but they have to trust you, and I think with seeing it, they believe it.
I think the other thing is you might be able to appeal to common experiences that people have of limiting work in progress and how we sort of take them for granted and they make perfect sense, and then ask why it doesn't make sense in the context of the work that we do. I mean, you can think about the way traffic lights manage entry into a freeway, just as a simple example of that. Or if you go to the checkout lines at Costco, they'll come out there and they'll scan in your stuff earlier as a means of achieving greater throughput. So I think that there may be some circumstances that you can appeal to help do that. But I think Jim's point about getting people in a room together and having them have this common experience together really makes a big difference.
Absolutely, and I think what Jim said earlier, making them see the picture themselves, I think helps in establishing that trust and helping the team kind of go along with their allocation decisions and then learn from that. So let me go ahead and take some audience questions here, and I think Jim and Gary and Dragos, you should be able to see those questions on your screens as well. The first one is from Alan Dienst. I hope I'm pronouncing the name correctly. He says, interesting metrics, the backlog and WIP, and he has two questions about backlog. How do you accurately measure, since you can add more backlog just so you have a full list? Would seem you are really measuring backlog entered in a certain time frame.
Well, let me try to start with that. I'm not sure I understand the question exactly about backlog. Let me describe the process of building the backlog, and then Jim, maybe you can chime in, or Dragos from your own experience. Again, as I understand what you guys do, Jim, in terms of building the backlog, is this is something that is done in large measure outside of the board by the HR team as they go through and they sort through the various requests that they have from other parts of the organization. They set that up, and then you have a weekly cadence meeting to kind of go through that and decide what it is that you're going to be working on next. That's the way it proceeds. So
yeah, our backlog, we don't limit it at all. It's the users, if they feel there's a change necessary to the system, they write up what we call a system change request, and they go into the queue. And until they get prioritized and we start pulling them, they just sit in the backlog. So there's really no limit of time or anything.
Yeah. Dragos, anything strike you in that question?
I was looking to see if I can see the question on in my console. I think the question was whether or not you are limiting backlog, or can you repeat the question, Mahesh?
Yes. So what I think Aaron means is, and he's clarified, it says that that anyone can continue to add backlog at will, and it can get bigger regardless of how fast you're working on it.
Right. So my experience in the customers I work with, they're very large and they have very large backlogs, over 1,000 work items, a collection of bugs, feature requests, and enhancements. And we don't work with the whole backlog. Some companies, they choose to put everything in Swift Kanban, because you do have a feature where you can have up to 10,000 items, I believe. And that gives you some really nice reports. And I have a couple of customers who like that idea a lot. Then for any practical reasons, you can start to look at this data and see how things age, but also you're able to do better prioritization by segregating your backlog into different by different customers or by different type of requests, and then a subset of that makes it into your next column, and that's what we focus on. We don't focus on hundreds of the thousands of things in the backlog. The company either has product owners or stakeholders who bubble up to the top the things that need to be done next. Okay, and that's I think what we use in a way similar to what Jim and Gary showed in their presentation. Does that make sense?
Yes, yeah, I think it does. Hopefully it answers Alan's question. The second part of his question was related to work in progress, and his question is, shouldn't you be targeting a flat WIP max? It goes from 31 to 10 in the example that you'd shown earlier, but do you want to target a standard WIP at some point? And I guess maybe Gary, you could go back to the slide that he's talking about.
Let me see if I can do that. So what do you think he's talking about, the cumulative flow diagram?
I would think, yes, that's a yes. So so as you see here, WIP goes from 31 to 10. That's right. That's the slide he's talking about.
Right. And can you see this? Am I still showing my screen?
Yes, yes, you are.
Okay. The question would be, are you targeting a flat WIP? Is really the question that he's raising?
Correct. Should you be aiming for a very steady width of that band? Yeah. What are you really aiming at?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I would say in terms of answering that question is that it depends on the problem that you're trying to solve. So I think it's important for Kanban boards and just in any context, what is the problem? What's the pain point that we're really addressing at this time in our sort of maturation process with regard to these Kanban systems and practice of lean? And that can change over time. So I can think that there are seasons when what your goal and objective would be a sort of a steady state with work in progress. With Jim's team, and I'll let Jim chime in here too, there was too much work in progress. It was just basically getting a handle on the amount of work in progress that was going on and seeking to reduce that. I suppose it is possible at some point that they could reduce the work in progress too much, where some team members maybe wouldn't have enough work to be able to work on at any given time. I suppose that's theoretically possible as well. But I think in general the idea is think about the problem or the pain point that you're trying to address and adjust your system accordingly to focus on those particular pain points and address those issues, and then follow up in a systematic way to test whether or not you're actually addressing those. Jim, anything you want to add?
Right.
Yeah. We set our WIP limits, and when you start looking at the playback in a later session, you'll see that there are several times where we're actually way over our WIP limits. And going back and looking at those, we found that it's the nature of the tickets. There's a lot of little small ones. But in the past, what we do is we would just take the priority items, we would just keep throwing them over the wall, and no one would be there to work on them. So that's where this communication came in, where we said, there's times where the WIPs are going to be higher than what we should have, but that's okay. And there's times they're going to be lower, but that's okay too. It all depends on the size of the ticket. It all depends on what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
Right, and I think it talks to the issue that he also mentioned, Alan. That it is to do with the amount, the capacity that you have, and how well utilized are your team members.
I would also add that it has to do with the nature of work, whether it is more operations and maintenance, whether it is more operations, or whether it is strictly development. And what you start to see is that when you do strictly new product development work, people who get Kanban and they start to use it very well, they see the advantages of working on one thing at a time. So if they have a fixed team and they work on mainly new product development, they try to keep those limits low and consistent, mainly like maybe one per person. With operations and maintenance, you see the limits being a little bit more flexible. And let's not forget that work in progress, there's also a relationship, a very physical relationship between work in progress, throughput, right? And if you want, you have to see, well, what are you trying to do? Is it okay if your throughput is less, meaning that you may have more work in progress and that your cycle times may be a little longer, right? So you have this triangle between cycle times, work in progress, and throughput. What happens if you change one? What happens to the other two? And in some more sophisticated or more complex, larger teams, they may change and they may not have a fixed WIP limit, but they are able to observe by looking at the cumulative flow diagrams to see what happens when they change those WIP limits, and if those are things they want to live with or they want to change.
Mm-hmm. And this also, Dragos, in addition then to the nature of the work and the points that you're making too, the other part of it may be, again, from the demand perspective, from the customer's perspective. Right now, Jim has got one class of service, which is less than 3 weeks. Looking at the demand patterns and that over time and what the customers may want in terms of predictability and speed of feedback and so on and so forth, it may make sense to break that into distinct classes of service to address what the nature of the demand is as well.
Right. So let's take a question which sort of addresses this from a slightly different point of view. It deals with the roles that people play. This question from Donald Ross. He says, are you expecting that all resources working on items can do all of the jobs, define, dev, test? He feels that just doesn't feel realistic, and he asks because clearing a build requires folks to do their jobs that they're not qualified for or interested in.
Yeah, no, we don't expect that. Unfortunately, it'd be great if it was, but you know, like most organizations, we are very siloed. But these times of frames that I talked about, you know, there might be one person of the 3 of us or 4 of us that is more qualified, so the others kind of back that person up and help where they can. And so, you know, that's how we kind of do it. No, we don't expect people to do all the same things or be able to do all things.
Yeah, but there's again, just to accentuate the point you make, that is another way of helping to achieve greater throughput is to get resources who are more cross-trained. So they may not be able to do all of the activities that are represented on the board, but the more adjacent activities that they can contribute to some measure and degree is obviously very helpful and gives more flexibility in terms of throughput.
And the closing point here is that we're not pushing folks to do something. We're not prescribing that you should do it this way or the other way. Together we observe what happens and how we work, and if that's effective, or if there is anything that we can do about it. Sometimes you may want to do something about it and you can't. Sometimes you have to understand the limitations of what you do. And people usually, I see people volunteering, or even managers who may not have been open to cross-training in the past, to say, well, it looks like we could really benefit from cross-training. And they don't mandate it. Again, it's a team, what do you think? And then, depending on the circumstances, I mean, you don't want a DBA to cross-train or, you know, perform system engineering type of work. But again, there are companies in different situations. So the best advice here is to observe what happens and discuss with the team about, you know, what they're open and what makes sense to do. And if you have a high trust culture, the right decisions will always evolve quite quickly.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. There's a question about the way that your board itself has evolved. So a question from Sudhita. He says that you reflected a lot about the improvements that you got from compared to where you were when you started. Can you share some experiences of how your process or the board layout changed over time? Do you do retrospectives? Is this something structured in the way that you manage that process?
Well, like I said, when we started with the physical board, we had, you know, the prescribed expedite lane, and then we had the columns, and we said, gee, that's all we really have. And we put different colored tickets on there depending on if it was a mandated item or if it was an item that took longer, we felt longer than 3 weeks. And So we did that. That's how we kind of showed that. When we went to the electronic board, we were able to break things up into lanes more, and the board hasn't changed drastically for us.
The electronic board.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
It was nice to start, to me it was nice to start with a physical board to see some of what you actually were doing, and and then go to the electronic board. It just made the transition to electronic board easier.
Yeah. So this picture in the background, we're showing what one of the original boards, how it started out physically, and then underneath it, what it looks like sort of electronically. I would say, if anything, it's and it's been, again, as you say, it's been fairly stable. The electronic one hasn't changed and morphed that much. As far as sort of retrospectives and continuous improvements, Jim, maybe you can talk about that. How you see retrospectives or retrospectives, happening on your team, or how what's your take on that?
I don't know the question.
Yeah.
I guess
well, it would be like a kind of a formal review process after proceeding for like a week or a month or a quarter or for some prescribed period of time, saying, okay, team, let's take a look at what we've done to this point and decide what's the next opportunity for improvement.
Right. I think, yeah, we did do some of that. Like I said, one of the things we're trying to improve is predictability. One of the ways to do that is to improve on quality. So on the physical board, like I said, we would try to somehow, how could we represent that we had some quality issues. With the electronic board, with the playback, you have items, as you can see, items going from test back into development, back to test, back in development, back into test. So you can kind of track those. There's a log by ticket, and you can see how many times they went backwards and forwards. So then you can start addressing, okay, why did this happen?
Yeah.
And say, what can we do to change that? What's baby steps?
Yeah, and I would add to this. So one of the other things that we probably won't have time, or at least we're not thinking about talking about yet, one of the things both Jim and I have gone through is a Toyota Kata training, or basically the practice of the scientific method, a series of questions and procedures that you follow through to do this. And I would say with Jim's team and some of our other teams as well, we're doing this at a more consistent and systematic level. With Jim's team, there have been lots of sort of overriding issues that they've had to deal with and deal with rather quickly. The process and practice of a systematic, consistent cadence use of the scientific method through the Toyota Kata is more emergent on his team. But as we talk about becoming more predictable, as we talk about focusing on quality, all of those kinds of needs and drivers set themselves up perfectly for the practice of the Toyota Kata. And I expect that we may well be turning to that as a next step as we talk about what we can do to do improvement. So that's the closest thing to retrospective, I think, in Jim's case.
Great. A question on forecasting. You talked about being predictable and being able to forecast. There's a question from Kirk McKay. What is your experience with forecasting work completion, particularly on multi-project programs?
One of the things that the Swift Kanban board allows you to do is create what's called a parent-child relationship. So on your parent ticket, you could say, here's what it is. I've got 6 months that I have to get this done. And you can create children that allows you to break these tasks down into much more meaningful subtasks. And you can break them down into farther. And you can see those flowing across. And at any time, you can open up the parent and see where you are. So, that's kind of that predictability, okay? Most of the time, when you get a project, you say, here's what it's going to take me. They come back to you and say, you know what? Yeah, that's really great, but you got 6 months left for that, or you got 3 months left. By breaking them down in smaller tasks, you say, yeah, here's what it is. We'll work on it. You can show them the kind of your experiences with that the board has brought up, so you're much more predictable.
And at that level, Jim is talking about basically the basic sort of blocking and tackling, if you will, regarding setting up the system in a way that it's positioned to be more predictable. As far as the other kinds of things that we could speak to, and this might be for the next session where we could get into some of this stuff more. The cumulative flow diagram has a projection capability on it to give you an indication of where you might be completing, what you're completing. In general, collecting and baselining the system itself should set itself up for being able to do more sophisticated things with predictions and projections, and there's also Monte Carlo analysis and all that sort of stuff that other capabilities that are being offered are possibilities going forward in the future. But as far as where we are right now in our maturation process, being able to provide good, solid projections as to what might happen out in the future. It's very much just using the metrics that come with the system, the cumulative flow diagram, cycle time charts, and so on and so forth. And again, I think we can cover some of those more in the next session to see if we can address that question better.
Okay, we're coming to the top of the hour, but I have a couple of interesting questions that I would like to ask. One is to do with Swift Kanban, and let me go ahead and ask that. It's from Scott Schneider. Was there any resistance to keeping the cards updated on the web-based Swift Kanban tool?
No, really. Everybody, in our group, just the IT has the tickets, so we use a stand-up to kind of update the cards from the user standpoint. But it takes less than a minute or 2 seconds. It doesn't take any time to move the cards or update the cards.
Yeah, and I would say, just thinking of your group and some of the others, maybe there was some resistance and maybe a little bit of fear in the very beginning. Like in the first day or two, or maybe the first week, just people sort of unfamiliar with it. But as you use the board to actually give feedback and show that the feedback that you're given is in your daily stand-ups isn't to sort of persecute anybody or make somebody look bad. It's just, hey, these are the facts. This is what's going on. I think that those fears are overcome fairly quickly.
Awesome. And I guess there are a couple of questions which are sort of related to this. Earl Livingston asks, I meant to ask about, so his question is, you mentioned about, you talked about employee morale improvement in your presentation. Can you talk a little bit about that? And then Ram's question is that, how does the company manage and perceive success in this initiative? So kind of talk from an employee perspective, the team member's perspective, and also from the management perspective.
From the team member, I think at first there's resistance, there's fear. When you block a ticket, it's like, you're picking on me. Why are you picking on me? And when we try to pin them down to due dates, saying, okay, when do you think you can have this done? IT, there's resistance. But I think after a while, they got to the feeling it's not something that's going to be held over their head. It's just reality. It's nothing bad. And when they saw things happening because of their truthfulness, I think it made them much more open to say, yeah, I need help, or no, I don't need help. It's not blocked. Yes, it is blocked.
Mm-hmm. And maybe that goes to Earl's question, too, about employee morale.
Right.
Do you have any?
Yeah, like I said, our group is, at first, like I said, when we started putting measles on the board or block tickets, they took it very personal. But after a period of time, it was more of a joke. I know in one meeting, I came in because I was on PTO. They put 2 block tickets on my forehead because I was causing the problem. So, like I said, it's a lighthearted group, and I think people are accepting that it is that.
And Jim, that's probably the most important and insightful comment that you've made all along here. You are the cause of the problem. So as long as we can establish who the scapegoat is, that's the most important thing. We can move on. Was there something we didn't answer yet?
Could you also talk from the management perspective? How does the management see success from this initiative?
From our group, it's a lot of the initiatives or changes we do to the board come from the users. They see something and say, hey, can we do this a little different? And so that's the management coming to these meetings, understanding what's happening, knowing, okay, let's not pull this ticket because we know that this event's coming up, let's work on something else. So from the management standpoint, I think they really truly enjoy the Swift Kanban so that people can see things.
Mm-hmm. I think, again, in the next presentation, I hate to keep saying about this, but in the next presentation, we're going to have some content about opportunities for maturation and improvement. And I think there's two main areas that we have. One is in terms of understanding customer satisfaction, and the other one is also communicating benefit upstream and across stream in upper management.
Awesome. Unfortunately, I think we have run out of time here, and there are 2 or 3 more questions that were there, and but somewhat longer discussion questions. So I would request that we respond to those questions after the webinar, and we're very happy to do that in follow-up emails that we do for you. So with that, I think I'd like to close out on a great session and a great presentation. We got a lot of positive feedback during the webinar, and especially through the questions. Jim and Gary, awesome discussion, and Dragos, great insight in explaining some of the things that Jim's team did at ATK. Just to let all of the webinar attendees know, we will have 2 more sessions on this. The second one, Jim and Gary will take a deeper dive into some of the metrics that they generated using all of the work that they did using Kanban and Swift Kanban, and really give us a much better insight into the sort of level of improvement they were able to achieve, and measure it objectively, and be able to sort of see it for their own team as well as for the overall company as such. And then we follow that up with another session where we will talk a little bit about what if you were implementing Kanban, what are the various imperatives that you could look at. And Dragos and I will talk a little bit more about how best to gear up for implementing Kanban in your organization, how to look at implementing an electronic tool, and really sort of getting organized for being able to implement it thoroughly. Dragos, I wanted to ask you if you wanted to make some closing thoughts, and Jim and Gary from your side after that.
Well, I would say that if folks are new to Kanban, the best way to learn is to start doing it. There is no wrong way to start. The only thing to remember is start with what you do now. Create a board that reflects your current process. Then populate it with your work in progress. Make sure you reserve space for a column to the left for a bit of a backlog. And then observe how fast you get things done and how they move and where things get blocked. If you're bored, if you have control, or if you interact with folks across different departments, it's okay. You can create a bigger board and engage with other people and see how you affect folks downstream from you and how folks upstream from you affect what you do. Just get started, observe what happens, and learn more about it. You'll get better and you'll see improvements.
Excellent. Jim and Gary, any closing thoughts from your side?
Jim had to take off for another meeting, but I just echo Dragos's comments there about getting started. Get started in whatever context you can. There's a number of different resources, places you can read about it, but it's as simple, I think, as Dragos described. Set up a board and start using it. Use it for your own personal purposes, or use it as a team, and then again benefit from others who've gone before you as much as you possibly can to refine and to learn.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Gary, for that, and thanks, Dragos. Thank you all for attending today's webinar, and we hope that you join us for the next 2 sessions that we will have in this series. In the meantime, if you wanted to get in touch with any of us, all the contact information is provided here for you. If you're interested in looking at Swift Kanban, please visit the Swift Kanban website. And we will, as we said, follow up with an email where we provide you a link to this recording, as well as the slides that you can download from the webinar. Jim, Gary, and Dragos, thank you very much. And all of you have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.